Hello and welcome to the Southbound Sports Show. I'm your host, Richie Leahy, here with my co-host, Maddie B. We got big news out of the NHL. I think it cleared a couple days ago or so, but they are finalizing their 24-team playoff. And how it's looking right now is that they are going to include every team, and it gets a little bit crazier than what I had originally expected. So what they're doing now is they are even including the top teams in this round robin. So there's effectively no bye. So some of the top teams, I think they said like the Avalanche, and there's another team in the West that has like a 6-game lead. That could be erased in the round robin format where they're going to go ahead and reseed everybody. So as crazy as it was me complaining about the Penguins, that was whenever I thought that it was only going to be them. So that's what I'm looking at now. And I see the team, the way that it's coming through, and I just don't see any other issues on top of that are going to make it, I don't know, like a little bit, like the basketball one, it annoys me a little bit just because they're going to throw in all of these teams, and then they're going to go ahead and their start date is August 16th. They're going to play a little bit of a tournament to start the finals, and then they're just going to have like a regular season to set the date. And so and what NHL is doing is they're giving everyone a fair shot, kind of saying it's like the World Cup where it doesn't matter what happened in the regular season or what happened in your friendlies and that type of thing. You're going to come back and you are going to have a chance to make the playoffs and make a run at it. So it's good news, I think, for everyone, and we get a little bit of more clarity with that. So I think we'll go through the rules here. What they're going to do is they have a qualifying round, which is a best-of-5 series, and then all the other rounds, so the regular rounds of the playoffs are going to be the best-of-7. So the highest remaining seeds are going to face the lowest remaining seeds, and then it goes through that way. They're going to reseed every round. So let's say if a team that has a poor record right now, they get in, one of the top seeds, like let's say the Avalanche do get pushed down to a 3 seed or something. If the top teams above them lose, they could end up being the number 1 seed playing the worst team. So it helps out just because they might get screwed in the first round, but they should effectively have that home ice advantage if they want to have it for the rest of the time. So that's how it's going to go. And you're going to have the top 4 teams, Eastern and Western Conference. That's what's going to happen to determine the seeding. So you have a mini tournament between Boston, Tampa Bay, Washington, and Philly in the East, then St. Louis, Colorado, Vegas, and Dallas in the West. So it's not like those teams, I mean, it's basically they get a bye, they're in the playoffs, but they're still playing games. So it's not like they get extra time to just rest up. So I feel better with that. What are your thoughts on it, Matt?
Initially, I wasn't sure how I was feeling about it because on one hand, I feel like it's kind of throwing away the progress that the teams that were already in the lead or already had good standing in the conference. You're kind of setting them back, having them into the tournament. But the more that I was thinking about it, I think it kind of levels the playing field because everyone missed time due to the pandemic and being out. So in a way to kind of to stir up interest within the sport and get things back going, it makes sense to include as many teams as they have and to just do it in a knockout style format.
Yeah, it should be pretty cool. And I just wanted to come back at this point. I'm a little concerned that I didn't see anything about the actual date itself. Whenever you're looking at the NBA, they have a hard deadline set that they're going to start the playoffs in August. And the way they made it sound was that they might have a play-in tournament. I wonder if that means they couldn't hit the start date for the regular season, and they're going to try to get that done. Because that would be crazy if they ended up scrapping that plan and they went with the single elimination tournament or something to get that play in for the last seed. I think that would be more exciting anyway. So maybe they're already planning for that without having to redo everything that they announced initially. So I can only hope. The other thing is baseball, they want a hard end date. So they've been going back and forth, and I've told you, I think we talked about it on the show, I don't think that they're really going to have a set date. And we argued about it last week, and I just wanted to clarify because I got some comments on it. What I meant is that I want them to start now. Like, what's the difference if they start in, like, what's today's date, the 9th? Like, what's the difference if they start June 17th? I don't know if is that a Monday? Like, what's the Monday date? Like, if they just sat down and they said, it's the 15th. So, like, next Monday, they just said, you know what, we're going to start. And you had said about injuries, and I don't know if that was on the show or not. You were like, well, someone's going to come in and they're going to get injured. And I said, that's fine, but what they're talking about right now is they're talking about coming in and having a practice in July. Why can't they come in and have those practices now? College football has already started with athletes on campus. I think a lot of schools, Alabama, I just know off the top of my head, Alabama had 5 players, I think, named with coronavirus. Okay, that's going to be an issue for everyone. But why can college players come back, but the pros can't come back and at least start to get that ready for whenever they decide the rest of it? I know there are some logistics on the other side, but right now they need to get the players in shape, like you said. If you're concerned about injuries, why wait until August? You're giving yourself 2 months to get back in shape. You've only been out of the game for 3 months. Like, it shouldn't take that long to get in game shape. Like, if these players went home and they gained 300 pounds just eating food, playing video games, that's on them. They knew that they could come back to the playoffs at any time. So start the workouts now, get everybody back, and then start the workout from there. But that's my thoughts. Do you have anything else on that?
Well, just thinking about when the NFL was having their labor issues the last time. When the players came back, you saw a higher increase, and then the work stoppage wasn't very long, but there was still an increase in player ACL injuries and different things because you can tell them, oh, be ready, do this, online or virtual workout or whatever, but whatever workout you're doing at home isn't going to be the same as when you're with your team, when you're with your strength coach, when you're with whoever those people are. They're going to push you harder and hold you more accountable.
Yeah, but they could still be playing with those guys. Like, we've seen the videos, or at least the cut video of Ben Roethlisberger throwing that football. He had like 3 or 4 guys that he was working out with. You can't tell me the basketball players can't get together. They were already going out together anyway. Like, team up in little groups. I mean, you can have a limit. They can do their own thing without their coaches. I don't know what the rules are. But basketball, I mean, you can pretty much work out anywhere. It's not like you need a jugs machine or something. Like, football's a little bit different because you need to have, like, if you're a wide receiver and you're trying to do solo work, you kind of need someone to throw you the ball. Basketball, you can kind of do stuff by yourself or in, like, groups of 2 or 3. I mean, it's not going to be the same, but if everyone's under the same restrictions in terms of fair play, that works. It's like the NHL, they have a different issue where, same thing. How are these people going to get to the ice if it's closed, and how are you going to stay in that shape? That's where I think I would be wanting to get them back on the ice as soon as possible for that reason. Like, hey, we need to start skating yesterday. Like, let's not wait. You're going to tell me, oh, we're going to bring it back. Awesome. It's taken how long for them to even figure out the playoff tournament? In that same time frame, they could have been training and starting to get in shape, ready for the games to play.
I agree 100% with you, but I think the sticking point to it, and it's one of the things that I think consistently we've kind of vented on here about, is that it boils down to the money aspect. When you're looking at the professional teams compared to the college teams, they have so much more at stake because of the union, the players' associations, and trying to get people on the same page. So when you have people negotiating over, like with Major League Baseball, where they're fighting over what percentage of their salary should they be given and different things like that. I think that's what ends up making that such a sticky situation, because they're going to want things to be as uniform as possible across the league, and they're not going to want it to be where the teams that you typically would think are going to prepare better or be more disciplined, have those higher levels of accountability, they're going to maintain that regardless of the situation. But they're trying to keep it, I guess, the same as possible to try to protect all the players in the league.
I say let them do whatever. You might get a team winning the championship that might never have won it. Look at the Redskins. Joe Gibbs took advantage both times they had a lockout. I think they had 2 lockouts, and he won Super Bowls both years because he was able to keep the team together and working out and doing all this stuff, even though they had, I think the one year they had scabs or whatever. So they had everything in place to get the thing done. And he was able to do that based on his leadership. So, like for these other sports, if you can't get it done and they have a precedent like that, that's on you at some point. At some point, you have to do that. So that's what I think. The other note I had, we talked about early. It was early. So some people came back and said, yo, the Steelers aren't going to be practicing just like at some random thing. They're practicing at Heinz Field. That wasn't announced when we did the show last week. I think they just announced that a couple days ago, that they're going to be doing their training camp at Heinz Field, which, again, I think it makes sense because you're trying to get the players exposed in one location. That's where they're going to be playing. So why not? Go ahead and have that set up and then go from there, because if you have them used to working out there, then you're going to be used to having everything ready to go on game day. So I like that move, and I like the way that they're going there. I think, let me see what else I had on here. I don't even know if it's going to tell me. So let's see what else. Well, baseball we hit on a little bit. Some of the football stuff. I think the last thing that I had was college football. I said that they're back. College football players are back on campus. I think it varies a little bit by school and state rules. But all the conferences as of right now are ready to play, and they're going to be coming back. It's not like Pac-12 we mentioned last week. They're back. Initially, they said that they were thinking of spring ball or whatever, but everyone's going to come back, and the NCAA actually sent out a timeline to schools trying to get the start date uniformly set. Like, I don't even know if I have it on my phone to look at here, but I know the initial thing was you had players report to camp, then you had them do team workouts, things like that. Then you get ready for the game. You have your pad practices and things like that, and then you go into your weekly schedule. So I'm wondering right now, what happens if a bunch of teams have players that come on campus and get diagnosed and have to sit out because they are sick? Is it going to push any of those other dates back? Because like right now, everything's set. It's all cool. Players are coming back. What happens in July if half your team's out? What happens if the quarterback room gets it? All your quarterbacks are out. Are you going to be able to just wait? Like if that's a week before the game and your quarterback room goes out, what happens? Are you done? Do you have to play a wide receiver? Are you Maryland? That's what happened to Maryland in the past couple of years.
Have the symptoms if you've contracted and they put you out for 2 weeks, almost like the concussion protocol? Absolutely. So I think you really have to be careful with those symptoms and monitoring players that you think could be at risk.
And so you're thinking that they play no matter what. If a guy's out, they have to play just like he was injured. Is that what you're saying? Because I think I might have lost you there for a second.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I'm thinking is probably the way they're going to do it.
Yeah, because, I mean, it's a lot different if you have a couple linemen out versus your quarterback's out. But it is college football, and I would think that a lot of the players that they recruited played quarterback in high school. So maybe I'm wrong. I mean, it's going to be something that's a little bit different for everybody because, like I said, the guidelines are general. We don't know what teams are doing what. Some schools weren't even back yet. So you have certain schools that are on campus starting workouts that are players-led or by trainer. And I actually forgot to even put this on here. Speaking of trainers, there's a bunch of people speaking out against Chris Doyle. I just know it's Doyle, the University of Iowa strength coach, so much that he's on a leave of absence. And this guy has been under fire multiple times in his career. He's been with Ferentz his entire time. And if you remember, was it a decade ago now? They had a bunch of players get sick with it was like rhabdomyosis or something like that, like a very specific disease that's caused could cause kidney failure or something like that. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. If the player allegations come out, I know he's under administrative review. What does Kirk Ferentz do? And is that going to change the look of the Big Ten going into the season? Because some people are calling for Kirk Ferentz to step down too for running kind of like a, what's the NCAA rule that they always throw out there? Lack of institutional control. Sort of like, hey, you should have known what was going on inside your program. So waiting to see before we report on some of the allegations, waiting to see what comes out and is, I guess, validated or whatever, to see what happens there. But that's going to be a big training camp thing where players are supposed to be coming back and your trainer's out right now. So they don't even have, it's not like it happened in the off season. It's right when you're coming back, your trainer's gone. The most important guy on campus. So that's a big one. Anything else for college football?
Yeah, it's a pair of things, because part of it was kind of piggybacking off of your Doyle part was the duo of Clemson with Dabo Swinney, where you're seeing no coverage at all, where a former assistant was accused of using racial slurs towards players, and it just kind of swept under the rug. Where meanwhile, in an interview at Florida State with Mike Lavelle, where he had said in an interview that he had talked individually with players, and that wasn't the case, and we definitely misspoke, and we had people that were for a day and a half calling for him to be fired, and I thought that it was interesting to see that dynamic where, on one hand, you have actual issues happening on campus at Clemson, and it's just business as usual, and no one bats an eye, no one covers it, no one says anything. And at Florida State, where Norvell had a chance to, adjust what he said to correct the interview statements and comments that he made and talk it over with the team, and you still had a large majority of people that were really quick to say, oh, he's going to get fired even faster than Willie Taggart. I think it's interesting how fast people are trying to just throw them under the bus.
I was going to have a Florida State joke to start the show by asking you how you thought Florida State was handling things. But then they had the crazy scenario yesterday where their social media put out that there was an active threat on campus and never followed it up for, I don't even know how long it ended up being. And then they said that there was an active shooter and then gave a description, well after the fact. So it's just almost like, holy cow, what are you doing? Let's get some transparency there.
Yeah.
So crazy scenario. So I figured not even a time to joke about it. Not even. So crazy down there. But yeah, some programs, like you talked about, I think ESPN put out their most desirable programs, and then they did it in tiers. And I think they had Florida State in the tier 2, and they had Florida in tier 1. And they were saying, Florida has more, I don't even know what they said, more recent success or whatever. But historically, Florida State's a much better program. And they play in a much weaker conference. There's zero way, if I'm a prospective coach, there's zero chance I'm going to Florida before I would go to Florida State. Let's be honest. And that same thing that they put together, they knocked down Michigan and Notre Dame because of the academics of recruiting. But I'll tell you one thing that you wouldn't pass those up for: money. There's no way Notre Dame and Michigan aren't tier 1 schools, because look at the paid coaches right now. Michigan had the highest paid coach, and he was winning 8 games. Like with Harbaugh, I think Nick Saban and a couple other guys earned more money lately. But there was one point where Harbaugh was the highest paid coach. So you can't tell me that Florida, or let's be honest, Georgia is more desirable. I mean, I guess Georgia, you can just keep choking and losing, and you don't have the hot seat. I guess you would have a bigger hot seat at Notre Dame and Michigan, but you're also getting paid more. So,
well, I think there's what you're seeing with that is you're seeing a two-pronged attack. As part of it is that for the better part of the 90s and 2000s, Florida State had such a strong stranglehold that I think it pissed off a lot of the people that are now reporting that they just don't like Florida State. So you're going to get any chance you can to rub salt in the wound. You're going to get that. And then also you have for as much of a dominant stronghold as they had, they also just completely fell off the map, at the end of the Jimbo, beginning of Willie Taggart era. So there's a lot of cleanup that needs to be done. And it seems like they're starting to pick things up more with recruiting right now. They cracked the top 25 with the current recruiting cycle. So I think they're getting there. And actually, it's a positive sign of signing linemen. We've talked for a year and a half about how the offensive line has been horrible and they haven't been able to get anyone in. They're starting to sign recruits. I think that's going to be something that's going to help turn the program around.
Well, I look at that, and I mean, I know we joke a bunch about like the different tiers and how I always said that there's like 5 power programs. The only reason Florida State and an ACC program doesn't make that list is because Florida State just hadn't been around as long as the other schools. Like they were a women's school until the 60s? I don't know the exact dates, but the other teams had a 50-year head start. So it's not like Florida State couldn't become one of those top schools. And realistically, if they would have kept that winning, pedigree, which they basically already have. But let's say right now, if they were on Clemson's run, if you switch them and put Florida State there, because that would have been the third decade where they were as dominant, winning multiple championships, I think they make that bump. I think they make that list with the Michigan, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Alabama, and I throw Texas in there. I think it's interesting that they keep adding USC. USC wasn't good. They had a big run with Pete Carroll. Now they're back to being a worse Michigan. Other than location, there's really nothing there that puts them ahead. So in terms of money and getting anyone that they want, it's just they're not on the same level as those other schools. And Florida State is most likely going to make that jump. Like I said, all they need is another good run, another decade or so. The only unfortunate thing is that Clemson jumped up right when that could have been that. Florida State did make a playoff. If they took that bump with Clemson instead of them in the ACC, it would be them right now. And I don't think anyone would argue against it. The only knock on them right now is money. But I think that that's going to clear up whenever they realign college and start to expand the playoffs. Because what you're going to start to see is teams that constantly make the playoffs right now, like Clemson is, in this 4-team playoff, they're going to be able to pull in better recruiting classes. When that advantage is over, and you have Clemson and Florida State both making the playoffs every year, what would really make a recruit go to Clemson? Especially if Dabo does jump to Alabama or leaves. Is that going to be a situation where it's coaching, or is it actually the school? Because you have to have continued success. Clemson hasn't really had that. It's more of a recency bias, to be honest. But if they start losing, is all of that luster going to go down? And that's what I think. I honestly think that that's what it is. And I before we get into the Oklahoma State thing, Duke came out and they were talking about being against paying players. Was that an official Duke document that went out? Yeah, well, it looked like, from the Vice President and Director of Athletics, Kevin White. He talked about at Duke how he was a player and he doesn't think that they should get paid by endorsements. And I'll tell you right now why. No one cares about Duke down here. Who is going to endorse Duke players? And I know people might yell at me and come after me or whatever. I'll get a lot of heat for this. But Duke right now, they are nowhere compared to UNC just in terms of local advertising and things like that, and same with NC State. Just in terms of like the locals and seeing more flags, I rarely see Duke flags because Duke's more of a private school. They have a smaller alumni base. I know they have a richer alumni base than a lot of schools, just looking at their endowment and things like that. But whenever you're trying to impress recruits and say, like, look what we can do for you, a lot of that stuff is local, and they don't have it. That's where I really think when this hits, I've been saying, like, I've been joking saying, I can't wait for it to happen because Michigan's going to unload the money cannon and wait till you see all those ads in, like, Detroit, Ann Arbor, and all that stuff. It's going to help a lot of city schools, too, and I think Pitt is one of them. Because if you're looking, like, even at Penn State, they're in the middle of nowhere. Where are they going to get advertisements for their recruits? Like, they're going to have to go to Philly and Pittsburgh, and then they're going to compete directly where you have a large alumni base in those cities from those schools. Who's in Tallahassee? Boom. Who's in, like, Orlando? UCF might take a gigantic jump, even more than what they are. And, I mean, there have been rumors of them joining the Big 12. I don't see a reason why it wouldn't happen. And, I mean, that would be detrimental to Florida State and Florida just having another team to split recruits with. That's kind of what happened with Texas whenever the Big 12 got so big, with like Mike Leach being there a decade ago or so. Texas really started to fall off because you have a couple schools come out of nowhere. Baylor used to be a doormat. They're able to build up, and now Texas has to recruit against Texas Tech that came out of nowhere. Baylor, these are traditionally bad programs. TCU, they had to jump up a level. They were a lower level completely. So now Texas has to recruit against all these. If UCF makes that jump and South Florida potentially makes that jump, like, I don't think Miami will ever be back. Too many hands in that cookie jar, Matt. I mean, let's be honest. At that point, you're looking at, okay, what advertisements can Miami get? And I really think that that's why Duke doesn't want it to go through. They see what's happening. They see, like, okay, you go downtown Raleigh right now, you see NC State flags everywhere. Because that's the city, that's where the campus is located in Raleigh. You go anywhere else, like in Chapel Hill or around, Duke is going to be fighting with UNC everywhere else. And just in terms of number of alums, they're not going to be able to compete. So, of course, you're going to see private schools like this really start to talk about it because they're going to be the ones that are hit the most. They're going to have to cough up that money. They're not going to have the larger fan bases. I mean, they historically have smaller campuses. And circling back to my football argument, at some point it's going to come back to, is it Duke the program or Coach K the coach? Because they've only had success under one coach. So when Coach K is gone, what happens? Like, are they going to be able to steal a coach from somewhere else that's going to be able to take them to the next jump? I mean, people have always been rumored about Brad Stevens. Would he leave the Celtics to come coach at Duke? Like, I don't know. They're going to try to get someone in there, but at some point, you have to have. I mean, it took a while for Coach K to build that up. When he's gone, they can completely fall off the map. So, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that?
You know, I thought it was interesting that they would come out saying they're against paying players when just this past week we were talking about how Zion was going to possibly have to go under investigation and have to testify in court over getting paid. So, I mean, it's funny that there you have a program like Duke that say, no, we don't want to pay our players when they're actually paying their players. They're actually lining them up with sponsors and doing all that nonsense. So I just think it's another way that they're trying to get around actually having to do, having to put it on the books and show what they're paying the players.
And it also comes back to who pays for a lot of Duke players now. It comes back to their apparel deals. Everyone knows that Oregon has an in with Nike because he's an alum, Phil Knight. So why would he put extra money into Duke and all these? I know he's trying to sell shoes and things like that, but for a competitive advantage, he's not going to be hitting their recruits as highly as someone. I think he'll do a little bit of here and there. Look at like the Jordan schools. He has Michigan. He has North Carolina. I think Nike will continue to line those up and give a little bump. But like schools like Duke that don't have large fan bases that are pulling in tons of eyeballs. I mean, I know they have a national fan base, but they don't have built in, like, you really don't see a lot of Duke stuff. Like, go to Disney World and look around. You see a lot of the bigger state schools, shirts everywhere. You'll see Penn State. You'll see Michigan, Ohio State. You'll see Notre Dame even, just because of, like, how long and how big football is for Notre Dame. You don't see a lot of Duke stuff. Basketball season, you have people watching, but are they really paying? And that's what it comes back to. Where's the money coming from? And I think Duke knows that. They looked at the finances. They put out this statement. I think you'll see similar statements by the Stanfords, the Northwesterns, because a lot of their donation stuff goes right to academics. They're not going to have some Joe Schmo just throwing a ton of money at them and saying, you know what? And I mean, even like former basketball players, like, are they going to go ahead and put a fund together? Are they going to have stuff in place? I don't know. So I want to see that. Before I forget, the last thing I have on the description here is Oklahoma State got hit with a 1-year basketball postseason ban because of the FBI investigation. And it seems like it's going to be a start. They said that some other schools were notified. I don't think anyone else announced anything yet. But if I'm Oklahoma State, I'm waiting before I accept that. Because why? You weren't the only one in that document. Arizona, I mean, LSU still has their coach coaching. He was caught on tape. Nothing happened to them. Was it Will Wade? Is that his name? I can't remember that basketball coach's name. I think that's what it is. If I messed it up, who cares? They'll be coming back, and if the NCAA comes back and says, like, yo, sorry, we just only hit Oklahoma State. Like, at one point, Oklahoma State's going to be like, no, son. I mean, I know their biggest donor's not around anymore, but come on. Is that why they're hitting them? I'm curious to see what happens with this, because if I was a Cowboys fan, I'd be rallying around. I think they just got the number one recruit, or one of them, because of ties to the program or something like that. So is that going to affect, he's most likely going to be a one and done. Is that going to affect his recruiting? Is he going to open back up? Are they going to let him go somewhere else? Like, I need some more details on this, but I wanted to bring that up. You talk about all these people paying people and things like that. What about the schools that have already been doing it? It's a lot of them. A lot of the cash cows. But everyone's looking at Kansas now. Can't ban Oklahoma State 1 year and then let Kansas off. They had, I think, 5 or 6 of those penalties that they accused them of. Oklahoma State didn't have that many. They only had 1 or 2, and they already got the postseason ban. So that's what we wait to find out. Anything on that?
It just seems like it's another example of they're not a traditional powerhouse. So let's throw the fines and throw the ban at them, knowing that they're probably not going to put up a fight compared to, someone like a Kansas or UNC that the UNC they just flat out ignored what the punishments were going to be. We're not going to do that.
Yeah, that's what I think a lot of schools need to start doing. Saying, hey, we don't care. I mean, like we've been talking about, it's going to start to switch. Those basketball-only schools, Kansas, Duke, the ones that are historically bad at football, people always talk about what a great job Duke's coach does. He wins 8 games. These are the same people that are knocking Harbaugh, saying that he's doing an awful job. And then they're praising Duke. What's the difference? What is the difference, Matt? They both have high academic standards.
I would say that the standard of winning should be higher. And I think with a school like Michigan, they can recruit at a much higher level. I think they fall shorter of expectations compared to a school like Duke, where you're not expecting them to be recruiting, with top 25 classes year in, year out. And he's making do with lesser quality talent.
It's crazy whenever you look at it, some of the schools that people know now. And I wonder in 15 years how different that will be. Because I just saw the graphic someone, I think it was ESPN or Fox, put out about college basketball, what programs had the most wins in the Big Ten, and it was Michigan and Michigan State. And then I think Ohio State was up there. But like historically, like you think of teams like Indiana, at some point, when are they never coming back? And you're going to have like this turning of the guard. What's going to happen as football keeps getting more and more viewers, and it helps the other sports like at schools like Florida State? Are they going to start to win basketball national championships? Are they going to surpass the other ones? Like if you think of Florida, they had a 2-year run in basketball, and they're one of the only schools to win championships in, I think, baseball, football, and basketball with Michigan. I think Michigan State might be on that list, Ohio State, UCLA. It's like a very small list. But Florida State could be one of the teams that's next. They've been close in baseball. You start to make that jump in basketball, and then look out. And then you're looking around, and it's kind of like the same 16 teams are at the top of every sport. Because that's where we're going. As they keep monetizing everything, you have teams that like you root for, like in Iowa or whatever. At some point, you just got to realize, like, okay, they're never going to compete at this level. Should we drop them off? No. What are we going to do? Like, you have to specialize either in a sport like Duke did, where they put all their resources into basketball for a bit, or you just are happy with being mediocre, I guess. I don't know. So that's my final thought. We'll see what happens. Like that Oklahoma State, are you content with being second fiddle to Oklahoma? Because if you are, just accept the bid or the ban and then just hang out and you know what? Take your knocks. Or you start to push for more and say, like, no, we're not going to take this. We're going to be top dog, because that's the only way you're going to be able to make that jump. That's just my opinion.
I agree.
I mean, you got to look at other states. Like Michigan State, they don't take any shit from Michigan. They push back and get that stuff done. And their basketball coach, Tom Izzo, he puts it up, and now he's like the class of the Big Ten. I think he's like the last big-name coach left, right? I don't even know off the top of my head. You have, was it Archie Miller at Indiana? But that's not working out too well. So Oklahoma State, they could kind of get there with Mike Gundy, although Lincoln Riley would have to jump and then hope they have a bad hire at Oklahoma. But anything else you want to hit on for this show?
Nope. I think that's about it for another round of quarantine-esque southbound sports.
Yeah, hopefully things are starting to open back up a little bit. And like I said, teams are back working out. We'll get some more stuff. I just kind of want some things to start at this point. But if there's anything you want to talk about, let us know. We'll probably do some transition content. Talking about how Coach is getting back into gear, ready for the season, because he might be on a shortened season stuff coming up. Still need some more clarity there, but we'll be having some content right from the coach's room. So as soon as we find out more, we bring that to you. Anything else you want, let us know. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next week.